And we are live. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, guys. Welcome to episode number 30 of Ummahpreneur Live. And on this podcast today, I have a very, very special guest that I'm excited to bring to you. And this is none other than Brother Muhammad Lambat. Now, this brother's from New Zealand. So it's actually 11 a.m. his time. It's 5 p.m. our time. So I know it's a little bit later than we usually go live. You guys are hopping on right now and you're like, well, how come it's 5 p.m.? So he really, all the other side of the world, New Zealand, was kind enough to join us on this podcast to share his knowledge on ethical investing. And I'm just going to introduce you real quick, Muhammad, before we dive in, if that's okay. So Muhammad is really an adaptable engineering graduate. Okay, so he has a varied background in digital media and marketing and retail and small business startups. And the thing that caught my eye is right now he runs a finance blog, an ethical investment and finance blog called Muslim Investing. And this is where he aims to educate and create an awareness around ethical finances and investing for Muslims. And I thought that was an amazing initiative. And he shares amazing beneficial content. So I thought I'd bring him on this podcast, share his information, his wealth of knowledge with you guys, inshallah, so we can get some of that sweet information that we all want. So again, Assalamu alaikum, Muhammad. It's such a pleasure to have you on this podcast. It's an honor, brother. Super happy to have you, brother. And then we start every single podcast in the same manner of really asking the guest to share a little bit about their story. So I want to know what inspired you to create Muslim investing in the first place. What is the journey you went through that got you to where you are today?
Yeah, so I've come from an entrepreneurial background. My dad, my granddad, all businessmen. So growing up, I've always had that business background, bigger business mindset. And so I've started a few small businesses growing up. I used to sell third-party GoPro accessories. And then I opened up a modest fashion wear brand with my wife, where we were selling hijabs and other hijab accessories in New Zealand. And
Awesome.
in that time, I also did my engineering degree, and I realized I wasn't super passionate about engineering. And I realized I was always interested in finances and money. And I started investing when I was 17, only really last year where I realized I'm not actually investing in halal investments. And so I've been really looking into that. And through that journey, I found it quite difficult to find information on halal investing and what makes an investment halal. And so I decided to create Muslim Investing for someone like me who's looking for how to make their investing halal. And that's sort of how I came up with Muslim Investing and continue to grow it, inshallah.
Inshallah, that's awesome. So it's actually stemmed from a place where you realized that you were missing that. And then so you realize, why not create it because it's not out there. And subhanAllah, that's actually the exact same mission and the exact same journey that I went through to create Ummahpreneur, where it's like, there's nothing really out there for Muslim entrepreneurs, that approaches entrepreneurship business from an Islamic perspective. Let's make it. So these are the best ideas. And I love that we can relate on that perspective. Now, share with me, brother, because there's so much, that you share that's interesting, beneficial on this blog and on your Instagram. And if you guys aren't following, check him out. It's at Muslim Investing on Instagram. And it's an amazing account that he has right now, sharing beneficial content. And I want to ask you because, all this content that you share is focused around really helping Muslims increase their wealth, right? Invest it in an ethical way, in an intelligent manner. And so I want to ask you because recently I've, read a few articles that stated that Muslims are actually more likely than non-Muslims to report household incomes that are lower than the average for their specific countries. Now, I want to ask you, does this have anything to do with, Muslims not having an opportunity to invest ethically, to invest halal, or maybe they just don't know? Do you think these two are related?
Yeah, I definitely think a lot of Muslims don't invest because either they don't know what investing is, or they think it's all haram, or they don't know how to choose halal investments. So therefore they stay away from it. So they're missing out on an opportunity to invest, save, and grow their wealth.
Yeah, 100%. And I completely agree. And we recently brought Manzil on this podcast as well. And they have an ethical mortgage Islamic finance company, which is really amazing. And when you look at all these Muslims that are missing out as well on real estate, a big reason for that is the lack of ethical mortgages or mortgages that are interest free, right? What do you think of real estate as an investment, real quick?
Yeah, I mean, a bit young for that right now, but definitely something I would suggest getting into if you can afford to.
Right. Yeah, definitely. It's super interesting right now with COVID and the prices that are constantly on the rise.
Exactly.
It's absolutely crazy, and especially in Canada right now. I mean, how places are going over asking by 50,000, 70,000. It's insanity. I want to ask you, brother, why is investing an important part of creating wealth, right? Because again, we look at that stat and we think, Muslims are not doing so great financially. Is it because investment is important? Is it because we're missing out on a potential avenue that could really help us, grow our wealth and increase our financial ability?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of Muslims tend to have this cash mentality where save cash, keep cash, but cash devalues every single day.
Mm-hmm.
Three big reasons why Muslims should invest is one, we don't have access to Sharia compliant savings accounts.
Right.
And those who do, the savings rates are very low. Another one is inflation, which is 2 to 3% of your money is devalued every single year. And you've got zakat, which Muslims pay on. So
Right.
if we're not investing each year, our money is devaluing every single year. So that's why I think it's very important for Muslims to invest.
100%. I completely agree. And if you think about, as you mentioned, 2-3% inflation, and if we can't keep up with that, then you're actually losing money.
Exactly.
Now, I want to ask you. A lot of people hear this term ethical investing, halal investing, but what does that mean? What does ethical investing mean to you?
Ethical investing is investing in companies that are doing good for the environment. They treat their employees fairly. They give back to the community. They don't deal in pork, interest, haram investments like alcohol, things like that. They stay away from all that. Those are ethical companies to me.
Okay. Would you say that ethical companies also could be in terms of their business practices? Is that something that you research or you focus on when it comes to investing?
Yeah, definitely look into that. Look at the companies and see what they're doing for the environment, for the employees, and in general in the industry.
Mm-hmm. So walk me through a little bit more. What does your process look like for vetting that, right? Because someone could be like, okay, I understand that, but how am I supposed to take that information and, research every company out there? It would take me hours. Is there certain guidelines to quickly find out, if a company could be ethical or not?
Yeah. In a more financial point of view, there is financial ratios you have to look at. A debt rate, which is less than 33% of the total assets or the total market cap. There's an allowance of 5% of revenue from haram resources because most companies are not 100% not dealing with interest or haram investments.
Mm-hmm.
But a simpler way for Muslims to just screen stocks, there are two halal stock screeners, one called Zoya, one called Islamically,
Okay.
which would make it a lot easier for Muslims to vet these stocks to determine what a halal investment is. Another way of doing that is investing through halal investing funds such as Wahid Invest, Sarwa, Sharia Portfolio. These are all companies which offer halal investing. You could
Mm-hmm.
also look through their holdings and invest in those companies. That's a lot easier way to decide what a halal company is.
Right. We mentioned Wahid Invest. It's actually interesting. I've been looking into them a little bit. I want to know, based on, have you tested the platform? Have you tried it at all? I'm curious.
Unfortunately, not because they're not in New Zealand, but I have heard a lot of good
Okay.
things about the platform.
Awesome. Yeah, myself included. So I was wondering if you got a chance to give it a little test ride. But that's awesome. I'm glad to hear, that they have, an opportunity where you can just go and research. You mentioned like Zoya. How do you type that out if someone wanted to look for that?
Zoya, so that's Zoya.
Zoya. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Zoya. And so someone can go on there and they have a pre-vetted list of stocks. Is it because they're Muslim or do they just look for ethical?
It's a Muslim-based company,
Awesome.
and they screen US and Canadian stocks, and they'll tell you
Amazing.
whether it is halal or not. And there's a paid subscription where you can see in detail why it's halal or not.
Okay.
So
That
that's
makes
a lot
sense.
easier for most people to just get a quick, is it halal or not? But then I would
Right.
always suggest looking further into that. After that point, that would be like a level 1 vetting process.
Got it. So a lot of people actually ask me if investing in general in the stock market is halal or haram. Now, of course, we're not muftis here, but I want to know your opinion on, maybe some people think the whole thing is haram, and they have that idea. Of course, maybe we don't necessarily agree, but why is that? Why do you think people have this perception of the stock market?
I think it's the traditional trading sense where there's people buying and selling instantly. I think that's more to do with day trading, less so long-term investing. It's a lot of speculation with day trading where that portion
Right.
of trading or investing is looked at as haram. But from a long-term investing point of view, I don't see the issue with it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as you mentioned, as long as you look for the ethical and the halal stocks. Now, someone watching this could be asking, they could be thinking, all of this sounds really good, but why would I choose the stock market to invest in versus investing in real estate, or versus investing in, let's say, a business that someone that I know is starting? Is there a certain advantage to the stock market, or are there certain benefits to getting into the stock market, and especially getting early, right? Is there a certain benefit to doing that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with investing in a diversified portfolio of property, gold, for example, stocks, a mixture of them all. But
Okay.
for most people, it's not as easy to get into property. So stocks are a good way to get in early. They have low minimums, and like you mentioned, growing over a long period of time, which is the power of compounding.
Yeah,
So the earlier you invest, the more that money compounds, and over the years can grow significantly.
that makes sense. And compound interest, you might hear that because the term is compound interest, and I know you have a post on that, so I wanted to bring it up. Compound interest, is it halal or haram as a concept?
I get that question so many times. Compound interest is interest earned on interest. The term interest, or riba, in Islam is haram, but compounding interest on investments is not actually interest; it's profit. It's compounding profit. It's just the term that
Right.
used is compound interest. So there's no actual interest dealing with compound interest on investments, but compound interest on loans or conventional savings accounts are interest, which would be haram in that scenario.
Right. Walk me through what that even means. What does compound interest mean for someone listening to this? They're like, okay, you said a lot of words about interest, but what does that mean exactly? Is there a simple way to explain that concept for our listeners?
For example, you invest $100, and then, for example, it goes up by 10%, so it goes to $110, and then the next year, that $10 is part of the compounding. So it will be the following year will be $210 if you're putting another $100, and that will compound instead of just the $100.
That makes sense. So it's essentially because as that value, or as that wealth grows, because of the new size of it, essentially, I'm trying to break it down into super simple terms here for a layman listening to this. As you mentioned, because it's constantly growing, the percentage increase that you get gets higher and higher, right? Because every year it kind of resets almost the counter. Essentially, it doesn't. It keeps going, but just to simplify the understanding of it. Now. But how does compound interest apply to stocks? Because let's say I bought a stock at $100 and then tomorrow it's 110, but it doesn't necessarily, I mean, how does compound interest fall into that? Because, whether the price increases more or not, it doesn't increase the amount of shares that I hold within that stock.
Yeah, so that would be putting in more into the stock.
Okay.
So for example, you could use dollar cost averaging, which is where you're consistently investing in a company or fund over a set period of time with similar or the same amount.
Right.
So as you're putting into the stock or fund, that will compound on that. So if it goes up 10% and then you're putting in more, it'll keep compounding and keep growing like that.
Right. Walk us through dollar cost averaging, brother, if that's okay. Because again, I want to make sure that we explain all the terms that we're dropping here so that people don't think that we're trying to have an exclusive conversation and leave them out. What does that even mean?
So dollar cost averaging is where you're putting, say, for example, I'm putting $100 every month. So you put the same amount every month, and as the stock market changes, the prices change for the stock each month, each day. So the idea is you will get the average price for that stock over, say, for a year. So that is one way of investing, or you could invest in a lump sum. Both have different merits, but a good way without having the mental effort of deciding when good price to buy a stock is the dollar cost average, so that you don't have to think about, oh look, the price has dropped, now is a good time to invest. You just invest the same amount regardless of the price, and you will get the average price over the year.
Right. And this is a great strategy, especially for a company that you believe will grow long term and that's sustainable. Obviously, probably not the best for penny stocks, but great for companies that are vetted and that are proven.
Exactly.
Now, I want to know, my man, because, and I know this is like feeling a little bit rapid fire, but I appreciate you giving me these, straight and impactful answers, these bite-sized answers. But I want to know, are there specific sectors or funds or specific areas that you look at when it comes to investing? I know you mentioned, for example, gold. That could also be considered, a commodity, and we could also talk about Forex for a little bit. But is there specific funds, specific industries, sectors? If we talk about tech, if you talk about right now what's happening with electric vehicles, is there anything like that you're kind of on the lookout for that seems interesting to you?
Yeah, I'm definitely interested in tech stocks like e-commerce as well as electric vehicles. Companies like Tesla, those are growing industries at the moment. So I'm definitely on the lookout for those. There are a bunch of different stocks. It's just a more interest-based. So if you are interested in a certain industry, I would suggest looking into that industry and seeing what the growth is in that industry.
Mm-hmm. For someone that's starting off, should they gravitate more towards the bigger stocks that are generally safer bets, more proven than smaller ones? A lot of people will think, okay, well, I guess I'll go for the main, the big three or the big five: Apple, Microsoft, all these big companies that are known and proven over time. But are there opportunities other than these giant companies that people should find? Because sometimes, the smaller companies tend to have a higher percentage of growth if you can really pick them right. Is that part of your strategy as well? And would you recommend it for someone that's getting started?
Yeah, I would definitely suggest looking into it. But doing a lot of due diligence to determine whether you think the company will actually do well. Right. But for most people, I would suggest actually starting with a fund. So if you are fortunate to live in the US, Canada, UK, where you have access to companies like Wahed Invest, I would suggest starting out with a company like that, as it lets you invest in a fund which has a diversified range of companies, as opposed to choosing individual stocks. A good strategy is to use the strategy called the core satellite strategy, which is 60 to 80% of your investments are in a core fund, which is a low cost diversified fund. So for example, companies like Wahed Invest, those sort of funds, and then the remaining 20-40% is in a satellite, which is individual companies, more high risk. So the idea is over the long term, they will balance each other out, so that if the stock drops, you still have your core investments, which will cover that. So, and then that ratio can change over time depending on how confident you are with picking stocks and things like that. But it's a great way for most people over the long term to invest.
Amazing. That's interesting. We got a lot of questions coming in, by the way, in the comments that we'll get to, guys. So keep them coming because we're gonna have a Q&A portion. But one thing that I want to ask you, because based on what you're telling me, you're essentially saying that the optimal strategy would be to have a higher percentage, essentially the majority, into proven or at least less risky investments. So we're talking about, as you mentioned, funds where they're diversified for you, and then you can go and leave a small percentage for the ones that you're personally interested in or that you want to pick out. I really, really like that strategy. Now, let me ask you, because a lot of people, they hear the word diversify thrown around in investment. But why is that important? Why does that even matter for an investor?
Well, that matters because stocks can go up and down, and no one can really predict what's going to happen to a company. So that's why you have a diversified range of investments. You're looking at just diversified stocks, having in different industries, having funds, companies, having a mixture of that. And then on a more broader range, diversified in terms of having property, having business, having all those different avenues of income, so that if one drops, the other one is there, so that you're not losing everything at the same time.
Right. That makes sense. So essentially, it really helps you balance out when certain companies fall or certain sectors fall in price, but then others will hopefully, make up for that because they're going to have an increase, and it kind of balances out instead of always kind of following with single stock and going up and down every single time, and it's super stressful. I mean, it's interesting because if we think of that's the thing is investing in the stock market is such a beautiful thing, but it's also such a it has its pros and cons, and it could be a dangerous thing for the uninitiated, because if we look at a stock like what happened recently with GameStop, right? If we talk about that for a little bit, what happened recently with GameStop, and for those of you who aren't familiar with that, essentially what happened, I don't know how I can explain it in layman terms, but essentially there was the stock that was being shorted heavily by Wall Street. You know what does shorting mean, Mohammed? Let's refer to expertise so they can get this.
You're putting me on the spot here.
What does shorting a stock mean?
Shorting a stock is where you're hoping the price is going to go down. That's essentially what's happening. So in the case of GameStop, where hedge fund managers borrowed stocks hoping the price would go down, sell it, and then buy it back, and then the difference they make.
Right.
But because investors were constantly buying the stock up, the price was going up, so they were losing money. That's what was happening.
Right. So essentially, shorting is when you're making money when a stock loses value instead of gains value, right? Yeah. And so what happened is, all these hedge fund managers and Wall Street essentially was, really shorting GameStop as a stock and a few other retail stocks as well. They were essentially betting that they would lose value, but then people decided, we're going to drive the prices up, and it ended up they were trying to create something called a squeeze, which we'll talk about later, but a lot of people got a lot of money. A lot of people saw this happening when it was too late. Because, okay, let's talk about this for a second. This is exciting. If you hear about something popping off like GameStop in the news, right? Is it too late to jump on? Because this happened with crypto. This happens with stocks like GameStop all the time. And I see people falling for it all the time. It's like they get on once news is already out and everyone has, it's already happened. Like that boom has happened. And they're like, oh, let me get on and ride the wave. But by that time, it's like, if everyone's already talking about it, it's already too late. But tell me about that. Like, because a lot of people think, if I see a trend, I jump on it. Happened with crypto in 2016, happened with GameStop. It could be dangerous because the uninitiated, they get on and then they invest so much. They're like, this is it. I'm going to become rich. They lose all their money. They get depressed. Bad things happen. What are your thoughts on these type of events? Should people, take note of when something like GameStop happens and jump on? Should they avoid it?
I tend to avoid it. I mean, I went through the whole crypto where Bitcoin was at the highest price then, and then it just dropped significantly. And for most people, that is very depressing. And if you're putting your entire life savings in it, you could lose a lot of money. So it's very risky. Yeah. Investing when the trend is on is not the best time to invest, unless you genuinely believe that you believe in the company or in crypto, for example, that it will do well over the long term and you can afford to live without that money. I would not suggest getting in on the trends when they are at the high.
Yeah, 100%. But then is there, at least for you, a way to catch a trend in advance? Do you have something that you do? Do you, stalk some Reddit subreddits? Where are you at exactly? What are you doing to try to catch a trend before it happens? Because everyone wants to know how to do that, right?
Yeah, I'm still figuring how to do that out. It's not like easy, but looking 100%. Into industries, companies that I know, and new companies that are popping up, Reddit is a place to look, but yeah, there's a lot of research that needs to be done before choosing investments.
100%. And I know I'm asking you so many questions, brother, but I appreciate you just kind of rapid fire dropping them on here and sharing your knowledge. So seriously, thank you for that. And I think the listeners are really enjoying, mashallah. We still got, a ton of people on the live at 5 p.m., which is really good. So it means they're interested in this, which is awesome. So let me ask you, what are some practical steps that people listening to this, people watching to this can take to start saving up money and to invest? Should they prepare for anything? What kind of process should they prepare for? How can they best put money aside for this?
A good way of doing this is taking 10% of your earnings after you paid all your bills and everything else and putting that towards investments. And that's sort of the strategy I use. Putting money in 10%. For the long term, about around 10%, depending on your bills and other payments. So you can earn extra money through business, selling things like that, and using that money towards investments. Another thing I do is when I get a gift or receive any extra money, put half of that towards investing. So there's different ways of doing that. Yeah.
I was talking to a friend recently, and he said, because I was talking to him about this, and I'm like, dude, you should put some money aside for your investments. And he says, I don't want to, essentially, I enjoy the money that I have by spending it and by using it, and I don't want to deprive myself of that. But one thing that I think people need to understand, and it's important to understand, is that the 10% that you're putting aside is actually you paying yourself before you
Yes,
spend.
yes.
Tell me more
Yeah,
about
I mean,
that.
a lot of people look at investing like, oh, that's spending, but it's not.
Mhm.
It's saving for yourself over a longer period with the hopes that it will go up in value. So
Yeah.
yeah, it is a mindset thing where you have to understand that that money is yours and you will get it over a longer period. It's not like you're spending and that you're not going to see that again. So
Yeah,
it is definitely a mindset thing.
for sure. I want to ask your opinion, brother, because right now we live in a time where, I know, at least in my opinion, a millionaire isn't what it used to be. If we look at the people around us, and I mean, if I were just to kind of share my personal experience of a Muslim living in Canada, the middle, if you're a millionaire, I would say, low millions, like 1 or 2, 3 million, like you're pretty much middle class here. Like
Hmm.
the houses, the cost of a home, a decent home in Canada, in Montreal at least, is minimum 500,000. It's minimum 500,000 just for a decent home that you can live in. Let alone expenses in terms of living and cars and food. And so, how important is it to invest to prepare for that? Because I feel like the middle class is slowly getting priced out. They're getting priced out of the middle class, and we're falling into an extreme of either poverty or riches. Have you noticed that too, where you are in New Zealand? Is this a phenomenon that's happening in where
Yeah,
you are?
similar situation here where the house prices are extraordinary, and for us in New Zealand, we don't have a halal loan option. So
Hmm.
most Muslims, either they're taking out conventional loans or they're just renting,
Right.
and they can't actually afford to buy a property here because prices are so high. So it's difficult. So this is why investing is a good way of putting aside money when you're younger and letting that compound. So hopefully, you can put that towards a property um, in the future.
Inshallah, definitely, 100%. And that's the thing, is when you build it at an early age, the earlier you begin, the faster it compounds and it starts to build on itself, and it really grows into something significant that you can eventually use, inshallah, towards your retirement. And I want to get your opinion on this, because we used to live in a time where people could essentially work a job and have that job security, and then go through retirement and they still have their pension. But slowly as well, we're seeing kind of shift away from that. People are, jobs aren't as reliable and secure as they used to be, and people are forced to change employment and change workplaces every few years.
Hmm.
Do you think does that make investing more important for people that are going through this economic time right now?
Yeah, you can invest in like dividend stocks where they pay you. So dividend
Hmm.
stocks are stocks that pay a dividend, which is a small portion of their earnings every quarter or every month, depending on the company, to the investor.
Right.
And investing in that would be passive income. So then, at times where you haven't got a job, that money be still paid to you.
Right. Exactly. 100%. And really, I think developing that financial independence, especially in the time that we live in right now, if there's any avenues, any paths that you can take, then you should take them. And ethical investing is a beautiful way to do that. I want to know, in your opinion, have you met anyone that you have, for example, through Muslim investing, that's reached out to you that said, the information that you shared has been able to help me get started, or has been able to make a difference? Because I know that's what you're trying to do right now. And inshallah, through people listening to this, there will be many more that follow you as well and that see your work. But do you see that there's a need for this? Do you see that there's a lack, I guess, in the Muslim community of this knowledge of investing and of growing wealth?
Definitely, I get tons of messages, people reaching out and saying this is the information we needed. We need
Mm.
more people like this to spread the knowledge, and I agree. I think there should be more people spreading the information out there and getting more Muslims, especially younger Muslims, in on investing so that they can grow their wealth over long term. It's definitely
100%.
very important for Muslims to get into investing, I think.
100%, 100%. For younger people that are listening to this and that are like, listen, I only have, I'm a student, I got maybe $50 a month. Is it worth it? Should I start now? Does it even matter?
Yeah, even $5 a month, if that's all you can afford, depending on the broker, and what the fees they charge. But even if it's just $5, it's getting you in the habit of putting money aside for investing. Right. I'm sure most children can afford $5 a month. So it's just the habit of getting into putting money aside for investing for yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Got it. And really building the habit. I mean, the power of habit. I've read so many books on that. And when you build that habit and you make kind of like an unconscious activity, you'd be surprised at the amount that you can save, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years down the line. And I think, there's like these graphs that you can see online, like here's what a cup of coffee every day costs you, right? And if you were to invest it instead, here's how much you can make over a lifetime. So sometimes we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish with like 1,000, and we underestimate what we can accomplish with like, just $5 or $10 every day.
Exactly.
100%. Guys, put a coffee in your investment fund instead of buying it. Make the coffee at home. I love it, brother.
Exactly.
We got a ton of questions coming in, but I want to know, based on your perspective and what you've seen in your knowledge right now, you have an audience of Muslim entrepreneurs that are listening to this, inshallah, that will watch this as well. I want to know if there's anything that you feel beneficial to share with them in regards to investments, especially with entrepreneurs. Our income is usually a little bit unstable. Sometimes it's on, sometimes it's off. Is there anything that you could possibly share as advice or something that could help us when it comes to investments and growing our wealth as a little tip for the listeners here?
Yeah, as entrepreneurs, as you mentioned, the income is not always stable. So it is good for you guys to invest so that when you don't have as much income at the time, like dividend payments can come in, and putting aside money once a month, every 6 months, depending on how money comes in, and putting that aside so that you can invest for the long term, so that hopefully you can retire early and use that money to live.
100%. I agree, especially because, as you mentioned, because it's on and off and it's uncertain, when we have that little nest egg and it grows, it's just a way for us to, as you mentioned earlier, pay ourselves instead of, constantly just using that money to pay for expenses. And then there's nothing left for us as savings to hold us when the times get rough. Now, there's one question that I ask every guest before we dive into Q&A here. We got a lot of questions coming in from the guests, so we'll go through a few of them, inshallah, as well. But I want to ask you, Muhammad, if you could meet, yourself from, a few years ago, younger Muhammad, he was, maybe just finished high school. I don't know if you guys have high school in New Zealand. Is that a thing? Awesome. Because I know like the education system, the names change everywhere. Some people call it college or whatever. But yeah, so, you can meet him just getting out of high school. Is there something specific? Is there one thing that you could tell him or that you'd want to tell him that would help him, in his journey to where he is today?
Yeah, I would say take a side job, so earn more money, and then put most of that money towards investing. That's what I would say. The younger you start, the more it compounds. So that's literally what I would say.
Love it. 100%. And that's amazing advice. So if you're young and you're listening to this, you heard it right here, guys, on this podcast. Muhammad, thank you so much, brother. Let's dive into some Q&A if you're open to that. We got a few questions from the guests. Awesome, guys. So Bismillah, let's start our Q&A. And if you guys have questions other than the ones that are already in the comments that you've asked, make sure to drop them and we'll try to get to as many as possible while we have Brother Muhammad sharing generously his time here. So the first one here is actually an interesting question that I'd love to hear your answer to as well. And this one is, what are your thoughts on investing in crypto? It's an interesting discussion. We should talk about that a little bit.
Crypto. According to most scholars, it's acceptable to invest in.
Okay.
So that's the most popular opinion. So from that point of view, I invest in crypto. Not a huge amount, but I do invest in crypto. And if you've done the research and you believe it will go up in value, then I would suggest it's not a problem investing in crypto. Most of the investments, I would suggest investing in stocks, though. Okay.
Awesome. I'm curious. I'm invested in crypto myself as well, and even seeing the fall and then the rise again of crypto, I'm like, oh my God, man! I wish I caught that a little bit earlier too. I mean, I had invested. Let me tell you. Let me share with you guys one of my mistakes. I'm going to be vulnerable here. I invested in crypto. The reason why I have firsthand experience on don't like if you're hearing it. If let me tell you this. If like your uncle walks up to you and tells you, "Did you hear what's happening with GameStop?" And that person has never, that you know that it's too late. Okay, you know that if people that have never invested ever are talking about something, it means it's way too late. And unfortunately, that's what happened with crypto, right? Every single person was talking about it. Every single, your mom, your grandmother, it was on the news, and so everyone's like, "All right, this is it. Like we're gonna get rich." And I invested a little bit during that time. It was the all-time high, and of course, then we know what happened. It crashed, and alhamdulillah, now it's back up again. Thankfully, I held this whole time. And so thankfully it did pay off 5 years later. So we made it, guys. Glad to see that we did. Alhamdulillah. But of course, looking at that, I'm like, oh man, if I just didn't invest in that high and waited and I invested, like, let's say we did dollar cost averaging, Muhammad. Let's just say that we did dollar cost averaging on crypto, right? I mean, how much could you have made in terms of percentage? You're going to make like what, 500, 1,000% over the last 5 years?
Yeah, definitely. Because the price went up and then it dropped significantly, and now obviously it's back up again. So investing through that entire period, you would have got an average price, as opposed to investing in the high as you did, I did. It doesn't make a difference.
Yeah, 100%, man. And that's really the beauty of dollar cost averaging, and it really shows you that these tried and true investment lessons, it's something to follow, because it kind of helps you avoid these rookie mistakes of investing in all-time highs and selling in all-time lows. And even now, as Bitcoin is currently rising, and it's broken its all-time high record, I've actually decided not to invest, because I'm like, it's at another all-time high, and I don't want to make the same mistake I did before. I'm already holding. Let me just stick to what I have. So do you think for a novice investor, do you think now is a good time? Because they are breaking barriers, but at the same time, we're also seeing massive adoption from major financial institutions, right? So I want to know, is it still a good time to invest in crypto, in your opinion? I know this is completely an opinion, right? We can't predict the future. But in your opinion, is it still a good time for someone that's just getting in?
I haven't put more into crypto since. So that's just my opinion. It's so difficult to predict.
Right.
I'm tending to stay away from it, as it's just more risky. That's just my opinion.
Got it. 100%. Yeah, I completely understand you. I'm honestly in the same boat. I've invested again in 2016, and since then I haven't added more. I've invested in Ethereum specifically, so that's what I personally chose to purchase. I really like what they're doing, and I love Bitcoin as well. And I think it's an amazing investment. If you guys already have some, definitely stick to it. But for me right now, 100%, because at an all-time high right now, I don't know if I'm ready to go in at the current price point. I think it's up to like 50,000 right now, if I'm not mistaken, something crazy like that. Yeah.
But it's that thing where it's the all-time high now, but next week will it be the all-time high?
Exactly. Exactly. And I already got burned once, so I don't want to get burned again. I mean, what do they say? Like, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Right. So that's how that saying goes. So yeah, that's what we think about crypto. Hope you got some insight from that. I don't think we really gave them much guidance. But listen, guys, if you're thinking about investing in crypto, really the biggest thing that we shared is, it seems viable. It's being adopted by major financial institutions, but it is at an all-time high. So you have to keep that in mind as well. You're right. Yeah. There's a certain risk involved when it comes to investing in something at an all-time high. Another question that we have: so compound interest is profit. So can we kind of like just explain a little more what compound interest is for our listeners? Really make sure that they understand it.
Compound interest on a credit card loan and other loans, conventional savings accounts, that's not halal. Where you're paying interest or receiving interest through interest compounding in that way isn't halal. But compound interest on investments isn't interest; it's profit. So that's a normal compound interest. Isn't halal.
Can you give me an example of that? Like, is there just so people can understand? Like, give me an example of what that is. So let's say you buy a stock at a certain price, then what happens? Can you explain it in that way if that's possible?
Yeah, so you buy stock for $100, and then the price goes up by 10%, so it goes to $10. And then the following year you're putting in $100, and then it will go up by $210 will increase, not just the $200 where the initial principal you put in. So that keeps happening over every single year, and then that compounding portion is compounding. That is the profit that is compounding.
Got it. So does that absolutely have to be combined with dollar cost averaging? Like, could it be considered, if you just invest one time, would it still compound?
It's still compound because that, that's why they say start investing earlier, because someone to have started investing at 20 to ages of 40, and then if you leave that money till say 65, versus someone who started at 30 would need a lot more years to get the same amount as someone till the age of 65. Right. The power of compounding, the earlier you start, the more it compounds. Even if you would stop putting money in, you would end up with more.
That's interesting. So definitely an advantage to starting early, as we mentioned earlier. We got an interesting question from the audience. Another one here, and this one is: what's going to be the next GameStop? Let's see if we have like the magic orb where we can give the answer to that. We probably don't, but in your opinion, what's an interesting stock or an interesting sector to look at?
Currently, I'm looking at electric vehicles and e-commerce. But whether that's going to be the next GameStop, I have no idea.
So specifically Tesla, electric, and a lot of companies are developing electric vehicles right now as well, other than Tesla. So is it just as specifically Tesla, or is it as an industry as a whole, you're keeping an eye on it?
As an industry, I'm looking at other companies in that sector. So not just Tesla. Tesla is obviously one of the main ones, but there are other companies as well. Similarly with e-commerce companies like Etsy. Etsy is the company I'm looking at, and there's other companies as well.
Really? Well, but I guess because they are in e-commerce, right?
Yeah.
Is it because due to the pandemic right now and what's happening, consumer behavior is shifting towards online, so you're following that trend?
Yeah, exactly. Over the past previous year, a lot of e-commerce businesses have gone up in value because of that reason, because most people are buying things online.
That's interesting. So if I understand, if I were to kind of understand from that, what you're telling me is you should look at what's happening around you, not only in terms of like the stock market and what's happening there, but how is consumer behavior changing? So how are our lives and the events that are surrounding our lives affecting what companies we purchase from, what companies we do business with, and then tracking those companies? Because I mean, that's essentially Warren Buffett's strategy, right? If you read his investment book, he says, invest in the companies that you purchase, that you use every day, right? Because these are companies that are proven. Is that your same methodology right now that you follow?
Yeah, I think probably the best way of coming up with companies that you should invest in, not just looking at Wall Street bets and companies that are on trend.
100%. It's crazy, man. What happened with GameStop? It's interesting. So, guys, look at what you're using every day. Think about it. What are the companies that are using every day that you can't get rid of? I mean, one that's a safe bet that I know for sure I can't get rid of is Amazon. So they're probably a good bet. But honestly, Amazon, it's amazing to see their growth because people who've invested in Amazon 5-10 years ago, and again, hindsight is always 20/20 when it comes to investment. And I think I want to talk about that a little bit with you, because a lot of people kind of shoot themselves in the foot because of that, and myself included. Okay, so I'm not going to say that I don't fall for that same trap, but you look at a stock, you look at a crypto, you're like, oh, if I just invested in Bitcoin when it was $10,000, it's now $50K, I would have been a billionaire if I just invested in this stock. Is there a certain mindset that's required to investing as well? Is there something that we have to keep in mind? Because I think mindset is a big thing in investing, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Most people do that. I've done that. We all do that, the hindsight, but it's getting over that and finding now the next company, so that in 5-10 years, you'll be looking at other people and like looking at the progress you've made. Another thing is with like COVID, where the stock market went down initially, it's not selling, it's just holding.
Right.
And predetermining before, when you start investing, how long you want to hold for, not just based on what's happening with the market. And that's why dollar cost averaging comes in place, where you're not looking at the market, you're just investing in the company because you believe in the company, not what's happening in the market.
And I think that's really something that is important to highlight for people listening, because I want to make sure that when they listen, that they walk away from this episode, that they can make these intelligent decisions. And thankfully, based on what you're sharing, I'm sure they will. And it's really to follow these proven principles, right? Dollar cost averaging, which is when you, for example, decide, okay, I want to put in $10 a month. Even if it's just $10 a month, I want to put it in stocks, and you put it towards this company, then this is a company that you believe in. For example, Amazon, whether it's going up or going down, over time, you believe that the company is going to succeed, it's going to profit, and it's going to keep growing. And that allows you to, also disconnect a little bit from the news, right? Because a lot of people will invest, and then what happens is now they're tracking every single event that happens with that company, every single news piece that goes out, and with it, like, their insulin either spikes or drops completely. So, so it's important to remain emotionally detached as well with investing, isn't it?
Definitely. Don't look at your portfolio every day. Don't do it.
100%. How often do you look at your portfolio? I'm curious.
I look at it a couple of times a month, but yeah, the less time, the better. Especially if you're someone where it really affects, if the market has gone down, if you see negative, if it really affects you, look at it less often.
Yeah, got it. Definitely, because you could go crazy with these things, man. If you keep looking at it every day, every time it's in the red, it's like you're getting anxious, and then it's green, you're like super over the moon. I've definitely been there. So we know how it is, guys. Make sure to emotionally disconnect. We've got a few more questions, if that's okay with you. If we got a few more minutes, inshallah. So we got a really, really good question from one of our viewers, and this one is about shorting. I know we glanced over it real quick, but I want to highlight this here. See if I can find it. Sorry, let me pull it up here. Where was it? There you go. Is it halal to short a stock, to sell a stock you don't technically own? It's a very good question, actually. I'd love your opinion on this. Did you get the chance to research it, and what have you found?
Not a scholar, but I have looked at it to a certain extent, but I wouldn't say it's okay, because Islamically we should own what we should own what we're selling before we sell it. So I wouldn't agree saying it's halal to short a stock, but definitely look into it. Check websites like Islamic Finance Guru and other websites like that. Do a bit more research, I would suggest.
Okay, got it. So from what you found, in your opinion, you found it to not be halal, actually, to short a stock?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. So that's the straight answer that we got for you there. We got one more question. Well, actually, we got a few more, mashallah, but we'll see if we can dive into as many as possible. Is it better to invest and take advantage of compound growth, or should someone invest? So I guess the first one is talking about the stock market, or should someone invest in a property where the bank is taking advantage of the compound growth effect with your money over the years instead of you? Well, that would depend also what kind of mortgage you have, right? But is there anything we can say about that? Yeah, I'll let you read it.
It's a bit of a long question.
For sure. We're dedicated to you guys on this podcast. I'm doing this for you.
I would suggest having a mixture. It's depending on what you can afford.
Okay. So essentially diversify even in the type of investment. So not just when you invest in stocks and you're diversifying in terms of the companies and portfolios, but also diversify in the channels that you're investing in. So we're talking about stocks and properties and gold, etc. I want to get your opinion, actually, because real quick, right now, a lot of major institutions are actually transitioning away from gold as an asset and into crypto, which is interesting. I'm not sure if you've noticed that, if you've read that a little bit. But what's your opinion on gold long term? Do you feel like it's still going to be just as it was, which is the best way to secure your wealth long term? It's because that's how people used it normally, right?
I haven't looked too much into gold, but I would definitely suggest having some, but maybe not as the main asset.
Okay. What's the reason for that?
Because there are crypto and stocks and other things that are going up. I'd have it as part of my portfolio, but not a significant portion, just as part of the diversified portion of it. So it's just another thing that helps diversify my portfolio. Got it.
Now, is there such a thing as too diversified? Is there such a thing as spreading yourself a little bit too thin, where if an area gains, now it's so small that it doesn't end up having an impact on your overall portfolio? So what is the extent that you usually like to diversify it, or that you recommend diversifying at?
So like I mentioned with that core satellite strategy, I think the earlier you start, the more diversified, and as you learn more about investing, you have more money to invest, then slowly shrink that core portion down and increase your satellite, which is the more risky, more single stocks, those kind of things.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Great. So we got a few more questions, mashallah, that are coming in. Let me see if I can. I'll try to do 2 or 3 more. This is I think this is the most questions we've ever gotten on an episode. There's people are definitely interested in this topic, which is awesome, mashallah. So I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and time with us, my brother. So we got another one here. When we invest in a 401k, so this is a retirement account, especially in different funds, they'll have a list of companies that they invest in, right? So essentially 401k, you put it into a fund, the fund is diversified for you. How do we know if those companies are halal, especially for the ones that are not listed? So I know we glanced over it again through the episode, but is there anything that we can add to that?
It would depend on the company. So be contacting the companies and finding out what companies they're investing in.
Okay.
I'm not sure entirely how a 401k works, just because I'm not in the US. But if the company is halal to invest in, then it's halal. And if they're not mentioning the companies, I'm sure if you reach out to them, they can give you better advice on what companies they are investing in. And then you can check that through the stock screener or by yourself and then determine what's halal and then go from there.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, that's a straightforward answer. I love it. We got 2 more. I'll try to squeeze them in, and then that's it, guys. We'll try to get to the ones after that. But I know you guys still have questions, but we'll try to squeeze in as much as possible while we're running out of time. Since Tesla has gone so high, do you consider it has reached a level of maturity, or will it grow further? So this is just a personal opinion question. I know we talked about it a little bit. I know you said actually that you invested, so I guess you think it'll grow.
Yeah, over the long term, I do think it will grow. How high?
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea. But at the moment, I do think it's a growing sector in general.
Yeah.
So Tesla will be part of that sector in terms of growth.
100%. I mean, we're seeing a shift even in terms of the bigger companies like Ford and Toyota and even BMW and Mercedes. Pretty much almost every car brand, when you look at what their vehicle designs are, their vehicle concepts are for the next few years, they're pretty much all electric vehicles. They're at least based off electric vehicles. So it's definitely a trend that's currently rising for sure. So I guess actually that brings me to an interesting point, which is, look, if you're thinking about investing in Tesla, look at, and you look at Tesla and you think it's an automobile company, you can look at where the automobile industry is going, right? What are the concepts or, the future vehicles that Ford and BMW and Toyota and all these big companies have announced, and check it out and see, does this make sense? Does this also follow where Tesla is going? And that's how you can come to that conclusion. We got one more, inshallah, and then I think that's going to be the last question we take. So what sort of mindset should one look to develop at the beginning of their investing journey? We actually talked about that a little bit. Is there anything we want to add onto it? I know we talked about, really just keeping that emotional detachment, doing dollar cost averaging. So would you recommend dollar cost averaging as the best way to get started?
Yeah. Determining how long you want to invest for, what kind of risk you want to take, and then determine with that how diversified you want to go.
Okay, awesome. And I know I said one last one, but I gotta give this guy an opportunity. This is my brother Salim. We got a new ETF that mimics the S&P 500. Only the Sharia compliant firms in it. It's pretty amazing. I didn't know that. That's awesome. Would you advise investing in that as a diversified portfolio? The ticker symbol is SPUS. That's really nice. So if you guys are interested, SPUS, check it out. Yeah, let's see. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I would invest in a fund like that. Again, as part of the core part of my investments.
Okay.
I've looked at that ticker. So yeah, I would invest.
Really? Okay, awesome. I didn't even know about that. That's really, really interesting. Is that so? Are these guys like a hedge fund, or what do they put together exactly?
It's a fund, as far as I know. They're part of the Sharia portfolio. That's the name of the company that offers this ticker. So yeah, they offer halal investments.
Amazing, mashallah. So I love that there's new ETFs like this popping up. So check it out, guys. The ticker is SPUS. It's interesting, and this is a ticker that includes S&P 500 stocks, but only Sharia compliant, which is really, really nice. So I want to thank you, Muhammad, for joining me on this podcast. I know we went a little bit over, and I really want to thank you for your time, and I'm grateful for you coming on, sharing your knowledge, your opinions. I know we asked you a lot of personal questions about what you think about this stock and that stock. So again, everything that we're stating here is pretty much a matter of personal opinion. But I really want to just thank you for taking the time to share with us your expertise today. Where should people go if they want to connect with you, if they want to, keep it up to date with what you're putting out in terms of investment advice and stock advice? What's the best place to take them?
Instagram at Muslim Investing. That's my main source of information. I'm also on LinkedIn, Facebook, but Instagram would be the main place to go.
Awesome, guys. So you heard it right here at Muslim Investing. It's all stuck together. We'll drop a link in the description as well of the episode, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you'll find it there. And go ahead and give Muhammad a shout out and let him know in the comments that you're coming from the Ummahpreneur Live podcast so that he can know, that you're one of the crew, you're one of the members, inshallah, and that you're following him. Muhammad, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast, for being part of this. It was an absolute honor and pleasure. I've learned a lot. I hope everyone listening has learned a lot. And I hope that we'll have you again to discuss more strategies and more investment opportunities that people could possibly look out for. That would be awesome.
Inshallah. Appreciate you having me on.
It was a pleasure, brother. Definitely. Wa alaikum salam. Assalamu alaikum, guys. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.